So, Allie, if they knew this wasn't true, do we have an answer to why the campaign ran with it and is still running with it anyway?
That's the question, because the call with the city manager is not in dispute. The Vance team did talk with the city manager, and you see the Wall Street Journal reporting around that now. I did get a statement from the Vance team, a spokesperson, and I'll put that up on the screen for you while I read it. They say that Senator Vance has received countless messages from residents of Springfield on the disastrous effects of Kamala Harris's immigration policies. They list here a shortage of affordable housing, stressing public resources, declining public safety, all of which could be in the conversation. But of course, the current conversation is the one that Trump himself repeated on the debate stage around these unfounded claims of killing pets, dogs and cats in the Springfield area. That, of course, is an incendiary claim. It remains unfounded. And now we see the fallout in a town like Springfield, where you have officials at the state and local level trying to sort of put this genie back in the bottle. But the disinformation is out there at this point. And I'm struck that this could be a conversation around policy, around housing. And certainly those are the conversations that many Republicans are stressing the Trump-Vance team should be having as they try to have a dialogue and a debate over the policies that are at play in this election cycle. There are clear contrasts between Democrats and Republicans on that issue. But really, the idea that the Vance team and the Trump team are doubling down on the idea that rumor means it could be true, it could not, is really a question of if national political figures should be amplifying things they aren't sure are true, but are hearing from their constituents anyway. Clearly, though, we are seeing this Republican ticket do what it has done since I started covering Trump in 2015, which is having a moment of controversy and doubling down and continuing to just say the thing. In all my years covering Trump, I've never heard him say, I was wrong, I apologize, let's double back on this. And certainly it doesn't appear that that's going to be a new strategy that's introduced anytime soon. You see that from the former president, you see that from his running mate, and they have it again there in that statement.
It is true, Robbie, this campaign never seems to backtrack, even in situations like this. Is that because being right or wrong isn't the point? The point is to put Trump back in the middle of the national conversation. They did the right thing. Somebody on his staff fact-checked it.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, if Trump all of a sudden started tethering what he says to the truth, I mean, we'd be in a whole new world. This is the same guy who said you could get rid of COVID by drinking bleach and said he won the election and there was massive voter fraud, all of which are completely false. So this is very typical for him. I think you're touching on an important point, though, and that is that Trump, I don't think he really cares about the substance, but he certainly doesn't want to get into the substance. This is all about ego. This is all about fighting and creating controversy and constantly being at war against the media and these other forces he tries to conjure up. And so this is the only way he knows how to operate. And this is a fight he likes to have. And the challenge for Democrats is it's hard for us to get through with our message when he's doing this, right? It sort of sucks up all the oxygen. But as I know some Republicans are saying, there actually is a substantive issue here on immigration, and he just can't bring himself to engage in that substantive way.
I have a number of what I think are substantive things to talk about. Let me start with this one, Michael. We know there is a psychological cost. We know that people who live in that town say that they are scared. Nobody wants to see little kids having to go into school with state troopers standing outside. There is, though, also a financial cost, whether you're talking about the short-term cost of responding to all these bomb threats, I think 33 as of yesterday, or the potentially long-term cost if Haitians being targeted decide to leave town. There was a local CEO who said it puzzles him. By the way, his family has owned a business in Springfield for 100 years. It puzzles him why J.D. Vance doesn't understand the value of a stable workforce. So why does someone like J.D. Vance think it's a good idea to push an idea that's hurting his own constituents' bottom line and, frankly, local and state government's bottom line? Somebody has to pay for all this security and response.
Yeah, send the bill to the Trump-Vance campaign. If I'm the mayor of that city, that's exactly what I do. I'd send the bill right to them. And I'd have the parents of those students and the teachers call the campaign and let them hear exactly what their words have done. and let them know exactly what their words have cost and continue to cost that city. Make them pay the consequence for a lie they know to be a lie. And the fact, exactly what are we talking about here? We're talking about knowable facts that are ignored by a presidential candidate and his running mate, that they persist in lying to people, not just in that community, but around the country about something they know is factually wrong. And yet we still treat this as this is somehow news to be covering the fact that they're continuing to perpetuate the lie. Where's the consequence here? And so I think that, this is just the tip. You think this is the last cup of BS to come out of this campaign? Get ready, buckle up, because this is not about caring for J.D. Vance, caring for your constituents. Oh, that is about as foreign to him as anything else that's related to solid, sound public policy. Where is the conversation? So this is the point we're at. And I don't know what we expect to come next from this. And yet we continue to talk about it and covering it as if somehow these two individuals are going to, between the two of them, grow a conscience and actually say, oh, you know what, my bad. My staff called and told me, checked this out and told me that this was wrong. I misunderstood. Yeah, I lied about whatever. But they're not going to do that. And I think we're going to keep doing this sort of roller coaster ride with this campaign. And it's crazy.
So in lieu of that, Robbie, to your point, how does the Harris campaign message their side of this? What are your thoughts about how they've done it so far? And do you think that actually in the long run, we know who Donald Trump is appealing to, we know who J.D. Vance is appealing to, but do we think in the long run this is actually going to hurt them?
Well, the Trump campaign, I believe, has a ceiling around 46, 47% of the vote. They've got to break through that to win this election. They won in 2016 because of third-party vote share. That didn't happen in 2020, and they lost. So the current trajectory they're on isn't a winning trajectory. I think the Harris campaign has done a great job with this. We saw in the debate, she really weaponized this lack of substance, this obsession with spreading lies that he knows aren't true. So I think she's done a good job there. I find it ironic today. The president is complaining he doesn't have enough security. And meanwhile, he's creating a security crisis in a town. These parents don't have a private security force in the Secret Service. Of course, it doesn't excuse the threats that have been made against the president and the attempt to assassinate him. All that's completely unacceptable. But part of what I think you're going to hear the Harris campaign say is, this is Trump's America. It is dangerous. He will actually make your communities much less safe through his lies. The bully pulpit won't be a way to speak for the people, but a weapon used against the people. And this, to me, is a perfect example of that. And mind you, as you said, this is J.D. Vance's own state. He's doing this against his own constituents. So imagine what he'll do when it's the entire country.
So, Michael, I'm going to ask you a question that deserves a 1-hour answer minimum, and you've got a minute to answer it. So, sorry. But there was an article in the Haitian Times that was so great because it makes a point that the backstory of what happened in Springfield isn't unique. Quote, it's very much a part of a huge familiar trend across America, the arrival of new, mostly black and brown immigrants in majority white small towns and larger diverse cities alike that are not equipped to handle the influx. If the Trump campaign wasn't so focused on demonizing the people who have come in legally, who have jobs and are contributing to the economy of the community, what is the larger, more constructive conversation about how we help these towns and cities deal with understandable, I'm not talking about the racist part of it, understandable growing pains when other people come in and it changes their way of life?
But the racism is a part of it.
Of course,
you
it
can't
is.
You can't set that aside. I mean, it impacts the economics, it impacts the policy, it impacts a lot of things. But here's the dirty little secret in many respects. What was going on in this town before this crazy started? Every report I've seen says that the immigrant community was welcome. that they were, contributing and growing that community. That town had lost population. It had dropped from some 83,000 people to down to 60 or under 60,000 people. And so this influx of migrants who were there to work, hardworking, establishing businesses and working in the community, no one was complaining about that. No one was upset about that. And that's the storyline across the country until some politician or some racist organization or group of community people decide they want to other these folks because they don't like the fact that things aren't going their way. Or in the case of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, they think they're going to get some political capital gained from it, not in that town, by the way, not even in the state of Ohio, but in other pockets of this country where they need to shore up their vote or they need to affirm their credentials with a base that has gone MAGA and racist. So, this is the truth of the matter. There weren't story headlines coming out of Springfield before this that said, oh, you know what, America, we have a problem here in this small town. And that is what I think we really lose sight of when these moments occur, is that before folks were accepting these migrants and they were integrating and they were working and they were productive until J.D. Vance and Donald Trump decide to other them and turn their lives and the lives of that town upside down.
Let me add just one more fact. Culture Fest, which was going to be a celebration of the diversity of this community that a vast swath of this community was excited about, had to be canceled because of security concerns.
Then President Trump's travel bans immediately sparked confusion, a type of rolling chaos, those protests at U.S. airports and around the country. The ban was paused by courts. It was later narrowed. The Trump child separation policy was a crackdown to quite specifically punish and discourage migration by elevating cruelty against children as a type of policy. Now, Kamala Harris, a former prosecutor and current policy maker, is citing all of that and putting this through her platform and her campaign and her megaphone, if you will, on the front burner and urging people to look at that past, to consider how it would shape the future in a Trump second term. Well, she did this while addressing the Congressional Hispanic Caucus today. Here is, as promised, that warning about Donald Trump's mass deportation plan.
Donald Trump and his extremist allies will keep trying to pull us backward. We all remember what they did to tear families apart. And now they have pledged to carry out the largest deportation, a mass deportation, in American history. Imagine what that would look like and what that would be. How's that going to happen? Massive raids? Massive detention camps? What are they talking about?
What are they talking about? A fair question. Harris, again, invoking the history to look at the choice about our future as a country, as a society. And she's confronting those risks, taking on Trump and the details, the serious actual content of Project 2025 seriously. You can't just kind of convince everyone to read the whole thing. And at the DNC, in different nights, they hit different pieces of it. But this is a substantive conversation. You can be a nonpartisan, fair-minded, open-minded person and say, okay, what's in Project 2025? What does the deportation crackdown look like? How does that affect us? And is that what you want to vote for? Then, in the same address today, Kamala Harris broadened out to the plans and the debates over abortion rights, health care, and taxes.
Many of these Trump abortion bans that make no exception for rape or incest, it's immoral. It's immoral. If she chooses, she will talk with her priest, her pastor, her rabbi, her imam, but not the government telling her what to do. They will also give billions of dollars of tax cuts to billionaires and corporations, massive tax cuts, pardon January 6th perpetrators who attacked our Capitol not far from here. And I'm sure many of you saw the debate. So on that point about the Affordable Care Act, all based on concepts of a plan.
Concepts. And what you see there, as we've put together for you some of the key points Kamala Harris is making in that new address today, and the history and the tone matters. Again, I always try to keep it straight and tell you what we found, what the evidence shows, and what's happening. And what you see there is Kamala Harris's ability to bridge from the serious to the joyous, from the urgent warning to some lighter fare. That's part of the big contrast. And Harris and her team see the contrast as the key overarching message in this home stretch. They want a clear contrast, just as she did in that new interview at the National Association of Black Journalists. Like the debate, it embodied, it featured as reality, not just rhetoric, a contrast with Donald Trump's appearance before that same group. And like the debate, once you see the back and forth, it is hard to unsee.
I don't think I've ever been asked a question so in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you?
First of all, let me just say it is good to be with the National Association of Black Journalists, and I thank you for the work you do and that your members do every day.
I have been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Better than President Johnson.
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying that I think it's very important.
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
Give
me a definition then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition of
Sir,
that.
I'm asking you a question,
No,
a
you
very
have to
direct
define
question.
it. Define it for me.
When you are bestowed with a microphone that is that big, there is a profound responsibility that comes with that.
A profound responsibility. And let's be clear, responsibility, how you do your work, your professionalism, your fairness. In the case of the U.S. government, what happens when you take that oath of office, and do you take that responsibility seriously? All of that's different than ideology. And on that score, we have more news for you tonight. Kamala Harris is continuing to draw support based on responsibility from more top Republicans. You can see the headlines backing Harris, calling Trump unfit to serve. And that is precisely because, in their own words, they view Donald Trump as irresponsible with our national security. The New York Times covering over 100 new endorsements from Republican former members of Congress, former defense secretaries, leadership of the CIA, a group that joins one of the top hawks in the GOP, Dick Cheney, who recently endorsed Harris. This is Iraq War, Bush, oil guy, Dick Cheney. And that embrace, let's be clear, has come despite, not because of policy differences. It comes as Harris's coalition spans from the right edge of the Republican Party to the center, to the left of the Democratic Party as well, to cultural figures that can fill stadiums, from Taylor Swift to the new endorsement from pop star Billie Eilish this week. They joined Dick Cheney. And so, I told you before, we can go from the serious to the lighter tone. Let me just ask you straight up, seriously, who else, in fact, what else in our entire country could bring these three together on anything? I'm serious. I'm talking Swift, Cheney, Eilish. They do not agree on foreign policy or abortion policy or music policy. You won't see these three backstage together at the earnings presentation for that oil company, Halliburton, that Cheney ran. You won't see them backstage at the Coachella Music Festival, which Eilish headlined. The one thing that brings them together is their shared belief that Kamala Harris should be the next president, not Donald Trump. And they're taking those positions, by the way, even at the risk of disagreeing with or upsetting their base. Quite literally. Dick and Liz Cheney spent their whole lives in Republican circles. We know that. They are taking that risk and disagreeing with those people, most of whom statistically tend to still vote partisan, and saying, wait, not this cycle. They're saying, yes, we all voted Republican for decades in a row, but this cycle, you should vote Harris, not Trump. That's what the Cheneys are saying. And then on the other side, plenty of conservatives and Republicans buy music and go to concerts. So it is more than unusual. It's actually striking to see this organic, broad groundswell for Kamala Harris. And the Trump allies, they're upset. Trump says he hates to see this happen. Now he hates Taylor Swift. Before he was lying and claiming he got her endorsement because he understands that's a good thing in politics right now. So they lie and they pretend now. They say maybe they don't want these endorsements. Let's be clear. They do, and they're worried about the impact. And while they spent the summer, Republicans did, kind of gloating over what they thought was their preferred matchup against Biden, now they're waking up to a living nightmare. A resurgent Kamala Harris, I should say. A Taylor Swift hit that is featuring Dick Cheney and Billie Eilish was not on Republicans' bingo cards for the home stretch of this campaign. It's obviously good for Harris. Doesn't mean she will win. As I've told you, we're going to follow the evidence where it goes, but it is what momentum is made of. And it reflects something wider. As another artist put it this year, when it comes to connecting with the public's views, in this case, Taylor and others supporting Harris, it's not just me. I'm what the culture feeling. And that broader American culture matters. You can ask voters. You can ask the political experts. You can ask our lead anchor, Rachel Maddow.
Taylor Swift.
Are you enjoying your rent-free existence in Donald Trump's head?
The singer Billie Eilish has joined Taylor Swift in endorsing Kamala Harris for president.
Vote and elect Kamala Harris.
Vote like your life depends on it, because it does.
Something is happening here, and what it is actually pretty clear. And the breadth is clear. Jane Fonda, you can see, was out knocking on doors for Harris Walls. Back in the day, she was someone with a cultural following, a political activist, a young woman, initially sometimes attacked and dismissed. They tried to silence her. They failed. Billie Eilish is 22 years old, and you see her there with her brother, using her platform, encouraging her over 100 million Instagram followers to register, to get out there and to vote for Harris. So this is making waves, particularly among a key plank of the Obama coalition that Harris is trying to rebuild, young voters.
Billie Eilish and her brother endorsed Kamala Harris, which was cool.
Just vote. Just vote. Just vote. Just read. I know I'm going to be out, so just vote.
Duh.
Well. Billie Eilish came out today encouraging people to register to vote.
You can see some of the excitement. The point isn't that everyone has to agree. The whole point is that people who disagree about so much, from Dick Cheney to Billie Eilish to Taylor Swift, are agreeing on Harris over Trump.
In fact, let's bring in Chris. I want to bring in Chris Matthews here, Mika. Because, Chris, you understand politics. It's so strange how things have changed during the era of Donald Trump for the Republican Party. I mean, what I did is what a lot of people would do. And, I knew you're a Democrat, I'm a Republican. I would go on the floor of the House. They all considered me to be a right-wing nut on economic issues especially. I had a 95% ACU rating. And yet I deliberately made all of my friends there Democrats. I would go over, I would work with them, I would talk to them. I will tell you, I won't mention any names, but when they stood up and were demagogic, I would go over and I'd say, hey, can we sit down? You just said that we wanted to starve little kids because we're going to have school lunch menus go up 4.5% instead of 6%. That's hurtful. It's not true. Could we talk about that? And they'd sit and talk to me. Because you build those relationships. Politics is a game of addition. And when it was time to get a bill sponsored or time to do some heavy lifting, I would have my conservative brothers and sisters, and then I'd walk across and find 10, 15, 20 Democrats and get the job done. Yeah. That's how politics has always been until the last 9 years, where with Donald Trump, and Trump Republicans, it's like you've got to insult the other side. You've got to be mean to the other side. You've got to attack the other side. And again, all it does is lose elections for them. I just still, Chris, I don't get it.
Well, you know, the we-they thing has gotten completely out of hand. When you start going after people that don't have children as the enemy, I mean, how about young not mothers-to-be or just single women or not married women? The fact that you don't have kids, not necessarily some treasure house, you know. People want children generally, and to hold it against them. I mean, it's just subtracting. You talk about the politics of addition and subtraction. You're taking a whole level of people away. Women that never got married, men that never got married. Not having kids is something they all, you know something, when you have kids, we have 3 of them, your friends that don't have kids sort of adopt your kids. That's what goes on. People like having kids, even in a kind of an avuncular way. And they really look out for your kids. They say, how's Michael doing? How's Thomas doing? How's Caroline's doing? They are the ones that really adopt you. This is what happens when you don't have kids, naturally. You want to find kids to look out for. That's what people are like. And now they call them the bad guys. You know, it's about the abortion thing, too, in Pennsylvania. I'm telling you, this Dobbs decision thing in the suburbs, it's going to be a match for the rural areas where they are very, very conservative, and you're going to have a real battle up there. And Trump's behavior, and this guy Vance, who is a complete, I don't know what you call a quick draw. How did he become how did he become a pro-Trumper? Didn't he write a book against the guy? Didn't he make fun, Hillbilly Elegy? Didn't he make fun of the people that were for him? And then he jumped in and became one of them? This is a clown show. J.D. Vance is a huge mistake, and you can blame it on the kids, Trump's kids. They could have picked anybody else, and they picked more trouble. They have more trouble now with this guy than they had before, which is pretty amazing for Trump to say that. I've got more problems because of my VP guy. And this vice presidential debate coming up is going to be interesting because he'll be on full display.
The things that have come out of this man's mouth have caused more problems for the campaign than you could argue Donald Trump, which is really saying a lot. From childless cat ladies, which I think made women across America, Democrats and Republicans, extremely angry and protective of each other, to eating cats and dogs out of Donald Trump's mouth, and J.D. Vance as well, in Springfield, Ohio. And that's why I'm so confused as to why Sarah Huckabee Sanders would double down and be so, and this to me is such a dangerous behavior, to be so judgmental to other people, to other women. I've never seen that behavior end well for anybody. It backfires, being judgmental. And it was mean, cruel, all the things that you were saying, but also extremely judgmental. And that's another thing. J.D. Vance, Tucker Carlson, all these guys, men, are coming to the table and talking about women in the most judgmental and condescending way, on the heels of the front runner, the guy they work for, taking away 50 years of rights to women across America. How's that going to work out for them?
Well, and again, Chris, Mika says all this, but I'm just want to look at it politically again.
Well, that's what I meant.
Politics being, a game of addition. I know, but people will see, they go, oh, the libs triggered, blah, blah. No, it's not that. It's just the question, why do they keep putting their hand on the hot stove when they know it burns them? Definitely. It costs them votes. They lose elections.
You know, I agree, Joe, that hot stove thing's a good example. Why is Trump talks about late-term abortion or, right before a kid's born? He's bringing up the issue of abortion. Why is he bringing it up? Because he's attacking women. He says he wants women to be punished. I'm sorry, he never really took it back. He wants women to punish. McCormick, the guy who's running in Pennsylvania, he's the Republican candidate. He is opposed to even the exceptions for rape and incest. I'm sorry, that's where he is. And they're really making women the victims of their own punishment. And on the Haitian thing, I guess what they're up to is race. What they're saying is when they go after cats and dogs and all that stuff, what they're really reminding American people is we've got people coming in from countries who are black. We have black people coming into the country. Let's talk about that, because they want to bring that subject up. Like they talk about all the drug dealers coming in. What they really want to talk about is Mexicans coming into the country. It's a way of constantly bringing the ethnic issue in. They use the ethnicity card. It's always that, because if they can bring up the issue of, oh, they're all drug dealers, blah, 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 it's an excuse to say we're talking about immigration. If they talk about abortion, we're talking about women. Now, that's a weird one. Why do you want to make women your enemy when most voters are women? Well, you talk about the politics of subtraction. Why do you want mothers and grandmothers who have to worry about their daughters? When women under 45 say it's their number one issue, abortion rights. Number one, over inflation and everything else, immigration. So why are you making women your enemy? What's the politics here? I mean, Joe, I don't even understand the crude nature of it. What are you up to here? To make all women worry about their daughters? And their sisters and everybody else, and make all the ethnic people say, wait a minute, why is he going after these Haitians? Why Haitians? Oh, I get it, they're black. I get it. I get what he's doing. He's reminding the white voter, we got an enemy out there. We've got childless people. We got enemies. We got people without kids. It's really the politics of, Joe, you're so right. It's the politics of subtraction, not addition.
And the childless theme that we heard first from J.D. Vance and now Sarah Huckabee Sanders yesterday, obviously not a slip of the tongue. This is something they're pushing. Yeah. And you watch that, and let's talk about Pennsylvania. Let's talk about somebody in Bucks County who says, wait a minute, there are a lot of women I know who don't have kids, who have great lives. Yeah. There are a lot of women I know who wanted to have kids and could not. That's incredibly cruel. So help us sift through how any of this is going to play in the places that will determine this election.
Well, potentially, everything changed when Biden withdrew. You get an older guy, older than Trump. They're both old, obviously. I'm old. I mean, they're clearly old. Then along comes a woman about the right age. And she's got the zest. She's got the enthusiasm, the joy, if you will. She's out there enjoying running. And she's really the kind of candidate we normally vote for. So what does she do? I'm not talking about race. She said, there you go again, the same old tired playbook. That is so smart. That's what Jack Kennedy did with the Houston Protestant ministers in 1960. He said, I am not the Catholic candidate for president. I'm the Democratic candidate for president who happens to be Catholic. So he avoided the issue. He said, look, I'm not going to run here as the Catholic. I'm not going to speak for the Catholic Church. I have no right to speak for the church, and they can't speak for me. And it was so smart to nullify the normal American prejudice and say, look, I'm not going to acknowledge it by talking about it. It was so smart for Kennedy to do it, and it's so smart for Kamala Harris to do it.
And the polls show that movement toward her in Pennsylvania on the ground. Some, not huge, but are you seeing that anecdotally?
I think it's anecdotal. I think it's joy. I think that she looks like she wants to run for president. She's ready to go. She's got the resume. And Biden was, well, we know how Biden was. He was slow on the draw. And it was hard to get the words out. He hated talking, and I understand this, I'm a Catholic too, about abortion. He didn't want to talk about the right to abortion. It begins to sound like you're talking about abortion. No, you're talking about the right to abortion. And that's what he was not good at. He just wasn't.
All right, Chris Matthews, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. It's always good to see you. We'll see you again soon.
Today, everywhere bracing for the possibility of chaos around the 2024 presidential election. That's thanks to an ex-president who launched a coup attempt that ended in violence instead of simply conceding his defeat last time, and is now priming his supporters to be shocked if he loses to a candidate whose entry in the race has thrown him for a loop, a candidate who is beating him in levels of enthusiasm, crowd size, most polls, basically any significant metric for a presidential campaign. The Associated Press reports that one suburban Atlanta county is deploying local sheriffs at early voting locations and panic buttons that connect poll managers to 911. More from that reporting, quote, California's Los Angeles County and Durham County, North Carolina, will have new offices with significant security upgrades for this year's election. They include bulletproof glass, security cameras, and doors that open only with badges. Election workers across the country also will have new procedures for handling mail, including kits of Narcan. That's the nasal spray used for accidental overdoses. In some places, election workers are being trained in de-escalation techniques and how to respond to an active shooter. All of this is in response to the elevated threat level against officials in the wake of the 2020 election and Donald Trump's big lie. Here's Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco yesterday.
We are seeing an unprecedented and extremely disturbing level of threats of violence and violence against public officials, including prosecutors, FBI and other law enforcement agents, judges, and election officials. And this is a point really that we have to underscore. The threats against election officials who are oftentimes simply volunteers. These are people who are simply volunteering their time to help all of us undertake the most fundamental right we have, the right to vote, the right that secures all the other rights. These are people who are being threatened simply for doing their job. It's wrong, it's unacceptable, and it should stop. And we are doing everything we can to expose that and hold individuals who are perpetrating those threats accountable.
Here's what happened just this week on this front. NBC News reports this, quote, a senior law enforcement official confirmed that election officials in at least 6 states received packages Monday, but said that so far none of the packages have been found to contain any actual hazardous material. Secretaries of State, Attorney General's offices, and state election offices in Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Tennessee, Wyoming, and Oklahoma were targeted. The return address identified the sender as the USTEA, U.S. Traitor Elimination Army. That election officials, who, as Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco points out, are just volunteers, that they would be seen as traitors, is cause and effect, right? It's a result of a poison coursing through our democracy, the lie told by Donald Trump that the 2020 election was stolen from him, followed by the lie that this election would be stolen. And the person fomenting that lie is running for the White House again. Because of all of this, election officials are stocking up on Narcan. They have installed bulletproof glass and panic buttons. And in Washington, Democrats are preparing for a possible showdown again on January 6, 2025. Over on Capitol Hill, Politico reports this, that Democrats are, quote, hoping that Kamala Harris will win in November and they'll flip the House too, meaning it would likely be Hakeem Jeffries holding the speaker's gavel as the process of certifying a Harris victory gets underway. It's another scenario that is nagging top House Democrats, that Speaker Mike Johnson might keep his majority as Harris wins and finds himself in a position where he could obstruct the counting of electoral votes and possibly throw the election to the House under the constitutional provisions of the 12th Amendment. Johnson, after all, led House Republicans in filing an amicus brief after the 2020 election, asking the Supreme Court to essentially overturn swing state results. Now he's leading a charge suggesting that undocumented immigrants are voting en masse in what Democrats view as a coordinated effort to sow doubt in the election and lay the groundwork for mischief. Officials bracing for the worst and preparing to defend the way our democracy functions before, during, and after the 2024 presidential election is where we start. In a moment, we'll be joined by the Colorado Secretary of State, Jena Griswold, and voting rights attorney Mark Elias. But we start with New York Times reporter Nick Corsiniti, who's been on this beat for years now. Nick, I feel like you have this extensive and vast body of reporting that takes us through the voter suppression laws, first championed and passed and signed into law in Georgia, through the antics of non-certification, refusing to certify, things being maybe beta tested in Nevada. Take me through the state of play today, as we're now less than 50 days ahead of a general election.
Well, I think, unsurprisingly, we're back in the state that really first caught national attention after the 2020 election, and that's Georgia. The state election board in Georgia, which has recently seen a right-wing 3-2 majority take over the board, is passing new rules that are really concerning not just Democrats, but Republicans and election officials and everyone from the county level to the state level in Georgia that could possibly disrupt the post-election period. We're talking about, the certification, the counting votes, the tallying of votes, and the sending off of electors to the Electoral College. So last month, they passed a rule that would allow for local election officials to take a reasonable inquiry before they certify, which has raised a lot of concerns about whether that could throw certification into question. Now they're scheduled to meet on Friday, and they have over a dozen new rules and new proposed agenda items. We're less than 50 days out of an election. So Secretary of State Raffensperger's lawyer sent a pretty scathing letter to the state election board saying, you really shouldn't change these rules. The board of every county election official known as Gavrio in Georgia, they sent a similar letter telling them to stop. So we'll see what happens on Friday with the state election board in Georgia. But when it comes to concerns about these new laws, that's where we see the most action, at least right now.
Nick, let me just play some of the sworn testimony from election officials from 2020, at least half of them Republicans like Brad Raffensperger.
It has all gone too far. All of it. Joe DeGenova today asked for Chris Krebs, a patriot who ran CISA, to be shot. A 20-something tech in Gwinnett County today has death threats and a noose put out saying he should be hung for treason because he was transferring a report on batches from an EMS to a county computer so he could read it.
And then about 45 minutes later, we started to hear the noises outside my home, and my stomach sunk, and I thought, it's me. And then it's just, we don't know what's going to, the uncertainty of that was what was the fear. Like, are they coming with guns? Are they going to attack my house? I'm in here with my kid.
After the election, my email, my cell phone was doxxed, and so I was getting texts all over the country, and then eventually my wife started getting the text, and hers typically came in as sexualized texts, which were disgusting.
We have various groups come by, and they have had video panel trucks with videos of me proclaiming me to be a pedophile and a pervert and a corrupt and politician, and blaring loudspeakers in my neighborhood, and leaving literature both on my property, but arguing and threatening with neighbors and with myself.
I've lost my sense of security, all because a group of people, starting with number 45 and his ally, Rudy Giuliani, decided to scapegoat me and my daughter, Shay, to push their own lies about how the presidential election was stolen.
I've gained about 60 pounds. I just don't do nothing anymore. I don't want to go anywhere. I second guess everything that I do. It's affecting my life in a major way, in every way. All because of lies. For me doing my job, same thing I've been doing forever.
So, Nick, I played that because that is what Donald Trump achieved last time, without all the rules changes, without the laws being changed in statewide in Georgia and with this election board that you're talking about. Can you give us some specific examples of how the laws have been changed to make that effort easier in 2024 for Donald Trump?
Sure. I think it's important to look at laws like what changed in Georgia, reorienting the state election board to give it more partisan control, taking the authority from local election officials or secretaries of state away and handing it to partisan entities, removing processes that were trusted in the 2020 election, like drop boxes for mail ballots, taking those out of the equation. We've seen that across the country. But what I think is really important to look at now is not just how those laws have changed, but how there's active lawsuits and active litigation to try and further change the rules, and we're less than 50 days out. So there's, been lawsuits by the former president targeting mail ballots in Nevada, ones that could arrive late as allowed by the state law in Nevada. You have a little bit of a grace period, and they're trying to say, no, anything that arrives after Election Day must be thrown out. So that alone could, disenfranchise legal votes under Nevada law. But what it could also do is it puts into question a certain bucket of ballots, for lack of a better word. And then those could be used as, say, evidence in a future challenge. And we're seeing lawsuits already try and establish that there could be, certain questions or numbers of ballots that would indeed throw an election into doubt. At least that argument's being made, and it's certainly being made by the former president on social media. So as we kind of head into this final sprint in the general election, it's these lawsuits that are kind of taking advantage, I think, of some state laws that have been passed, and are going to really put that to the test. And new federal laws that have been tested, like the Electoral Count Reform Act, through the courts in their first general election coming up in November.